Mr. Bulgara, how are you?
Yes.
I think we can sleep. All right, everybody, 7 o'clock, call this meeting to order. Use the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call.
David Melky, John Cups, Nancy Rondell, John Leo,
Here.
and Matt Bulgara.
Here.
We do have a forum.
Excellent. Time for citizens' comment. If there's something that's not on the agenda, this is your opportunity.
I'm Jackson McBroom, and depending on how you measure it, I'm either a full-time resident of 5 or 6 years or a summer resident of 2 months every summer. I'm just rising, first of all, to thank you all for making this basically heaven, the San Diego of the East, without having to pay for it or live in California with the governance that goes along with it. So I appreciate that. I also happen to, my wife and I have a place out in Harbor Cove, and we come up, and our son lives in Southern Michigan, comes up, enjoys the beauty you guys help manage, and we very much appreciate that. Also, we have canine children that we are fond of, Airedales, Terriers, and we take them over to the little Traverse Bay Humane Society to get them some running in the pens over there, and we're donors to there as well. But to the extent that this is even a possible idea, the idea of considering, not necessarily tonight, but considering the idea of a dog park would make a lot of people happy. I think out in Harbor Cove, at least, we have 3 associations, you guys know out there. The renters are not allowed to have dogs for obvious reasons. So, but there in our small phase 3 association of only 2 buildings and 9 members, I think 4 people have dogs. So at any rate, there are alternatives, but it's something I'd ask you long-term to consider.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Real quick, I spoke with the Weekly Landowners Association the other day. They had their annual meeting down at the church, and we promoted our bicycle licenses. So I'll do it once more. They actually, we gave away about 20 bicycle licenses. So if I can put it in the minutes, just the fact that we are still promoting our bicycle licenses to try to get every bicycle in town registered. So if we find one somewhere abandoned, that we'll know who the owner is without having like 15 bikes in our garage like we currently have. So just please pass the word that we're giving them away. Downstate, we charge for them. Here, we're giving them away just to get them all registered. So thank you.
Anybody else?
Yes, let me get rid of this call. Sorry. Just building on, I guess sort of building on what Jackson said. Many of you know our dog Blue, which we walk around town at least 3 times a day and meet a lot of people. And I'm always surprised at the number of people, strangers to town, who don't know we have a dog beach. And the other day when we were down there, our dog doesn't swim, curiously, a retriever that doesn't swim. But anyway, for some reason, all these years we've been going there, I've envisioned that sign at the corner of the beach saying dog beach. But I noticed it doesn't say dog beach. And I would ask the consul or whoever's in charge to consider an appropriate sign, because I'm amazed at the number of people who don't live in town, aren't aware of that facility. And I think they would find that to be or I know they'd find it to be a very attractive feature.
Very good. Thank you. Anyone else? Doesn't look like anyone on the computer wants to talk to us. Move to the consent agenda. Any issues? Public comment?
Looks good to me. I would make a motion to approve.
Second.
Matt McGarrett,
Yeah.
Nancy Rondell.
Yes.
Jamie Melky.
Yes.
John Leo.
Yes.
John Cox.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Good. What about dogs? some more?
All right, reviewing the city dog ordinances. So at the last meeting, as you know, Councilmember Rondell asked to review the dogs ordinances and off-leash issues at parks and at hours at the beaches and other dog-related issues. So I think the review that I did focused basically on dogs off-leash or focusing having dogs only at certain parks or at certain times at certain parks, as kind of was alluded to at previous meeting. First, I want to review what our ordinance says. Our ordinance says that any animal, including a dog, not under the direct control of its owner is a public nuisance. But there are multiple ways we define what a direct control means. One of them is on leash, but the other is with direct visual and audible contact between the pet and the owner. And then it says, is so obedient to the owner's command that it doesn't run away, it comes back to it. And basically, that means the dog does not need to be on a leash in Harbor Springs. And with regards to that direct visual and audible contact, it applies to both private and public property. And we also don't have any leash length requirements if it is on leash. So you could have a 100-foot leash or a 200-foot leash. It doesn't say. So I bring it up for a reason is that a lot of other communities have leash length laws and et cetera. Previously, also, we discussed, I think this was last year, or maybe the winter before last year, dogs at Zoll Street Beach, and decided to continue allowing dogs to roam off leash at the beach. We did also allow dogs to be off leash at the city beach during the morning or certain hours, including the morning hours, just to kind of mitigate some of the geese issues there. Chief Nutt has reviewed some dog complaints over just the past 13 months and noticed that we have 21 calls where a person had lost their dog or someone found a dog, 4 dog bites, 2 of which were on another person, 2 on dogs, 3 complaints of loud barking dogs, 7 complaints of dogs left in cars attended, and 3 dogs off leash. There have been no formal police complaints of dogs off leash at parks. So my feeling is that I think a leash law would help reduce just some of these issues. As far as Zorn and Zoll, staff recommendation is leave it as is or allowing dogs off leash when in the water and when entering and exiting the water. So there's different ways to approach it. I also think dogs should be required to be on leash on sidewalks. And we also think they should be required to be leash at Marina Park and Fort Park, absolutely, because of the traffic there. In doing the research, I did find a state of Michigan law from 1919, which is called the dog law, which requires all dogs on public property to be held properly in leash. So I haven't had Jim Raymer do the research yet in detail. I want to do it depending on how what the council decides tonight, but I think it might be worthwhile for Jim to see whether or not we actually are required to follow that state law as a city, or if there's any exceptions or other rules that might not allow that. If council wants to pass a leash law, then I don't think it matters. But if council doesn't want to adopt a leash law, then we have to consider about if we do want to allow dogs off leash at certain areas, what rules do we have to follow, signage, et cetera. So I'll let you guys take the conversation from there, but that kind of sets it up for what we have and what we might need to do.
Is there any public comment before we get into our discussion? Third?
Rick Darchinsky, 465 State Street. I was reading the ordinances and everything, and I think there's something you need to take into consideration that a dog needs to be on the leash, there needs to be a person at the other end. Because there are a few clever dog owners around town that walk their dogs, the dog is on the leash, it's 20 feet in front of them, they're not touching it, so. I think if we're gonna make people put the dog on the leash, we need the people to be attached to it, so that the dog is under control. Thank you.
Or.
One or the other.
True.
Yeah.
Anyway. Good, guess it's hard to.
Oh, yeah, I think you got.
Oh.
You have a comment?
Craig Coral, Pleasant View Woods. I've noticed a couple of times, 3 times this season so far, sitting in front of the Birch Tree Bakery, people walk right into the bakery with their dog. You know, they're not service dogs, it's just not a leash, always even a little puppy off the leash, just right in it. Now, is there a chance of a business owner having licensing issues from the health department if a dog's in where food is being served indoors in a restaurant, or in this case, the bakery? Thanks.
I don't know of any specific rules that allow or disallow dogs.
I always thought that you weren't allowed to have a dog in an inside establishment that serves food.
Service dogs, apparently.
Right.
Yeah, I
I'm
don't.
seeing that more and more in town.
I know at Perry Farm, we're not, their dogs cannot be in the dining room area. I don't know, it's not really a restaurant, but they are serving.
You don't have anything out?
I don't.
That would be probably the health department.
Yeah,
account.
The hard thing to sort of enforce is that is that not everybody labels their service dogs as a service dog. Like some people don't put the vest on, so then you'd be getting to like a HIPAA violation if somebody had a service dog. Have to confront that person, is that a service dog? And there's no real link.
That was a really gifted puppy.
Yeah.
I'll say we've had, over the years, people have tried to bring their dogs in without the vest. We don't let them.
I just don't want to say anything when I'm sitting out there. I don't think it's up to me. It's up to.
Right, you know, I would say she's got a sign on the door.
I know.
And they said, just bring them in. So dog.
I just don't want to find all of a sudden my morning coffee bakery place is closed because, you know, the health department found a dog that was in there. It shouldn't have been in there.
Right. Yeah, check into that.
So I think she's got a sign on her outside window that says only cards accepted, only credit cards accepted. So a lot of people that have their dog have, $10 in their pocket. And the only way to get served is to go inside with their dog, is what I think has been happening.
Well, she has a window though.
Yeah.
Right, but it has a sign on it that says no cash, all cards. And I think that might be one of the issues that, for me, it would be, if I don't carry my card, walking my dog, I might carry $10 or $20 in my pocket. So if I wanted something, I either have to tie my dog up to you.
Oh, I have dogs out there in the past for
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, or going without it, but I think that might be one of the issues is that people can't get it at the window if they pay cash. So they take their dog in. I don't know, I'm just guessing.
Yeah. No, we're getting off track here. I'll find out about the dogs in restaurants.
Okay.
Or food service establishments. I guess where we're at, I say I don't really have an opinion either way on the leash law. I say most people are pretty good. If their dog runs, they keep it on a leash.
I guess I would like to ask Kyle if it would be better for him, because our law is very wishy-washy. Under control is, it's very subjective. And, that's a fair number of issues, in all honesty, compared to a lot of things in town. And I think there's probably a fair number that go on. I know there are a fair number that go on before I hear about them in my house. So, I guess for Kyle, would it be easier for you if there was a law that just said they had to be on a leash except at certain parks?
It's like a twofold, because a park that would be easier, the person walking their dog down the street, it'd be very easy. The thing that's difficult is the 21 complaints where people call in and say their dog got loose. How do we handle those? Like, it's sort of like is somebody gonna call and say their dog got loose, if they know that, then we're gonna write them a ticket because their dog's not on a leash. So that's gonna be the difficult part of it, because it's no different if, let's say, at your house, your dog runs away from your property and is lost and goes to the neighbors, and the neighbor calls in and we gotta write you a ticket for your dog not being leashed. Maybe they deserve it, you know what I'm saying, but that's gonna be the harder part of it. As far as somebody walking their dog, that's easy. I mean, that leash law would make it very easy. The part that I see the difficulty is that's 21 complaints where we found a dog, you know, like somebody will call and say, hey, I got the terrier at the front porch, what do I do with it? And we end up finding the owner, taking it back and saying, here's your ticket. If that's what council wants, then that's what we'll do. But that's gonna be the harder thing than just enforcing like somebody walking down the sidewalk without their dog under control.
It may be possible, Jim, probably to craft some sort of an exception, like to say that if, you know, you're at home or something and you're he's away.
Not intentional for
Yeah.
them to have their dog off a leash.
And so that would cover some cases.
But some of these, I mean, one
Yeah.
of these dog bite complaints is a non-intentional one down on Travis Street where the dog just wandered off the property. He didn't actually bite the people, he just scared them. It was one of those 4 dog bites, but he wandered off the property. And I mean, technically, if we have a leash law, he's in violation. I'm good with it, whatever you guys decide, but that's that gray area that makes it very difficult. I don't know that we don't have that many complaints where people walk their dogs off leash. The majority of our complaints are dogs wandering or getting away from the owner that are like, if you go down the farmer's market, for example, the other day I was down there Saturday, dog slips out of his collar and takes off running. I could have technically voted and say because it wasn't under the command of the owner. But if that's the direction council wants, then that's what we'll do. They were able to get their dog and we didn't write it a ticket. I don't know how to handle that. You know what I'm saying? It's like discretion. It's like how we handle car crashes, for example, where there's a victim at a car crash. Obviously, somebody was at fault. We don't always write a ticket. You know, we sort of go on to the discretion of how the victim feels about it, like those dog bites, and whether we write a ticket or not. I know it's pretty vague, but it's sort of a thing.
But wouldn't that same approach apply to a leash law?
Yeah.
I mean, the officer would have the same discretion
Yeah.
to say, this isn't a violation of the intended law, which is to keep the dog under control if they run away.
Correct.
If it's a repeat offender, if the dog runs away 4 times, then you have the discretion to say, look, we gave you the warning and an education one time, here's your ticket for the 4th time.
You know, that's how we currently handle it.
Right.
It's no different. I mean, that's how we currently, there's a couple of dogs that are on our radar.
Right.
That if they violate again, they're gonna get a ticket.
So would a leash law help or hinder that?
I don't know.
Okay.
Well,
A definite maybe.
Well, I think where it's the most of the problem that I see is where there are a lot of people with a lot of dogs.
Right.
I mean, it's obvious if someone's walking down the sidewalk and their dog is 50 feet in front of them,
Right.
they're not really in control of the dog. But as you all know, Zoll Beach is one of my deals. I saw something just a couple of days ago again down there. And it's because there's so many dogs and there's so many people. So I think in some of our concentrated areas, we need to do something like the leash law is in place at the farmer's market. Am I right, Kyle?
Right. Oh, yeah.
And imagine what a zoo that would be if there wasn't a leash law at farmer's market.
Yeah.
It would be
Yeah.
a mess.
If we had a leash law, I could write probably 5 tickets a day right here and over here.
Well, this part, because I live right across the street, so I see it. This part, the dogs, there are hardly ever people that don't have dogs in this park. So for me, if we had a leash law, this would be a park that might be an exception, because this one is really used where dogs run and they don't really wander. I
No,
mean, I watch them all the time over there.
they're very, very well behaved.
They're the dogs that are in this park don't take off, they chase the ball, they come back, and there also aren't kids playing in this park for some reason. But the places where there are people downtown, where there's more kids on the sidewalk, Zoll Beach, where there's lots of kids, I think we need to look at doing something. And I don't have an exact answer to it,
That's
but
where, I mean, currently we don't, I mean, of all those, I mean, here's the stack of complaints that I read through. And of all those, like at the farmer's market and at Zoll Beach, it's gonna be Zorn Park, we haven't had complaints down there about dogs being off leash.
Mhm.
You know, farmers market, we don't have complaints. Basically, we don't have Jamie walks a lot and most of your dogs that attack you are coming off of porches and stuff, right? So it's not necessarily other people walking dogs off leash, it's people, dogs coming off.
It's never people walking their dog off leash. It's
Yeah.
always the
Okay.
dogs that are leaving their yard.
Yep, and so that's where the leash law is not necessarily gonna factor because it's more having your dog under control on your property.
So what can we do about that?
It continue to offense as we cite them.
So basically what we have in place is good.
Well, here's where I think a leash law would benefit, and it's particularly, and Jim, tell me your view here if you want to offer it, but I think it would benefit if we do decide to prosecute a case, and if it's proving whether a dog was on a leash or not is easy. Proving whether something was direct, audible, or visual control of the owner is not as easy. So if we do decide to prosecute or need to prosecute, I believe that it's easier if it's on a public sidewalk or public park that's on a leash. That's where I think it would help. I don't know, Jim, if you agree there, or.
I think, yeah, well, obviously, that's true. I mean, but it's entirely what council wants to do. I think there is, you can, the dog law itself, it says what it says, but there's also a provision under the fourth class cities act, which says that municipalities can regulate dogs on and off leash effectively. And so it's been, the general rule is that if the fourth class cities act contains permissive ordinance, that home rule cities can also adopt that kind of control. So I think you have the power to regulate. And I think that's how this ordinance came into place. There was a council at the time that did not want to have an absolute leash law in the city. But that can change. And if that was years ago. And if now council is of the mind that they want more control over what is may be perceived as a problem, then you can do that. So, but I do think it's up to you. And in terms of enforcement, certainly if a dog is on a sidewalk and attacks somebody, he's not under the control of the owner. It's a violation. If the dog is running away from the owner, he's not under his direct control. Whether he's got a leash or a verbal command, the dog is off leash. So would it be helpful to have in that kind of a case a more definite ordinance, possibly? And I think it's just a question for you: how big a problem is it, and do we want to impose that kind of control? Because, like, I agree with Victor. Like, if there's a leash law, it makes it very cut and dry. It's like the dog has a verbal command. Some dogs might have a verbal command from here to Pennsylvania. That's an argument that is people say, well, the dog's in my verbal command. No, it's not. It's 100 yards away from you. And sometimes the one we had down on Trevor Street, well, it was under verbal command, but it got off the property. So to Victor's point, leash law make it easier, but we don't have that many.
But isn't it tricky? I mean, let's say that we do say we want more control and we have a leash law, then you'd be obligated to enforce it with everybody.
Right.
And it feels like we're trying to fix something that isn't really broken. If as a tool, should something happen, it's useful. How do you accomplish that without over legislating and trying to fix something that really isn't broken?
Because one of those dog bites, the dog was on a leash, and that somebody came up to the dog that was on a leash, and the dog bit the person.
I mean, I get the concern. I don't know how we get to something better than what we have and not create a mess. I don't think any of us want to fix a problem, something that isn't really broken. And I'm not in favor of, over restricting what people do with their dogs, because there's so many of them, because overall that it's not a lot of complaints, and 21 of those is they ran off.
One thing we could do better, we can write more tickets, or a couple of tickets might send a message, but I feel like the guys are using good discretion in that.
So the majority of the problem, 3 months out of the year, 3-4 months.
Yeah.
No.
I see the deer around.
I see more dogs off leash approaching me in the fall and off season. I think in the summer, a lot of people put their dogs on a leash and make sure the dog is staying in the yard because there's so many people around. Whereas they're a lot more lenient when there's less traffic, less people.
Makes sense.
So there are a couple issues, there's a leash law, and then there's the issue at parks, whether we wanna, we look at dogs.
I think we need to. I don't have as much of an issue about leash law as I do in a couple of the parks. So, you guys all know that, you've heard me about that, and I see it every time I'm down there. You know, kids playing, dogs come tearing down, and the people let them off leash at the road. So they're not on leash and they're not under control of those owners at all. Whether they're on the beach or in the water or on the run into the beach. So I think that's something before next summer that we really should take a look at. I was down there this week and kayaked, and there were 5 little kids playing on the beach, and it was great. And a couple people reading their books, and the chair was quiet, it was nice, it was 10 o'clock in the morning. And I was out 45 minutes, I came back, they were all still there, playing in the sand, the kids were great. A dog came tearing down, another woman came with her dog, the dog ran into the kids. The 1-year-old was screaming, I'm like, oh, for heaven's sakes, you know, it's a beach for kids. That's what it started out as. And so that's a concern for me for next summer, for sure. Because when there are 15 dogs down there, very few of them are under control of their owners. And it gets pretty crazy on that beach.
That's funny, I've never seen an issue.
Haven't you?
No,
'Cause I-
with the dog
You go,
person interaction.
haven't you? Yeah, and I've had one, and I've also seen several of them, and I'm like, and heard about them at my house.
They leave the beach a lot and cross
Oh, yeah,
the street and
the dogs
approach
too.
me all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Somebody asked me to grab her dog for her last week.
yeah. I mean, there's a lot of dogs down there not under the control of their owners.
Yeah, no, I
For
would agree
sure.
with that.
Yeah.
Because they do, they let them out of the car.
They do.
Dogs.
They do.
Tear to the water.
Yeah,
Pretty much that's a dog park down there.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
big beach.
It's what it is.
It's not.
Yeah. We could cage it. Put a big cage up.
Yes.
So what you're saying is it's a dog beach by use, but not officially.
Correct.
Right.
The only complaint I've ever got down there that I remember is a dog pooping in the water and the woman didn't pick it up. So sorry.
A legitimate complaint.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that one.
so maybe we leave the leash law alone, or lack of leash law alone. We would have to put in strollers. Because a lot of dogs run around this town in little strollers. I see a lot of that. I'm on the thoroughfare for the dogs, I think, here. But I would like to take a look at those before next summer. And have a discussion, something about either hours or something. So that some of the kids can go back and use that beach again. Because a number of people told me they won't take the kids there when there are dogs.
That's good.
Those families that don't,
I don't think that.
but would those same,
We have a very
those same
large beach at
families?
the other end of town.
I know.
We has a very large beach.
I know, I just don't think that 1 of 2 beaches in town should be turned over to the dogs. That's just my personal feeling. And if we do, then we shouldn't have kids on it, because I think something is going to happen. I really do. I
Somewhere
mean,
along the line, people gotta take care of their own stuff.
Right.
Kids,
Yeah.
dogs, whatever it is, but
well,
it's
then,
been going on for years. We can't micromanage everything.
I know that, but there's a lot more dogs down than there used to be. There really are. I mean, one day I counted.
I think she's down there
dogs.
a couple times a month,
Yeah,
so.
It's, and I guess it goes back, that's kind of a multi-purpose beach.
Yeah.
For kayakers. I don't like kayakers. So let's ban kayaks.
no, it's not that. I mean, I think it's,
Yeah, in a kayak. I mean, it's the same thing. It's, or I don't like kids. I don't think there should be kids at Wall Street.
well, it's not that I don't like dogs. I just don't think the combination of dogs and like little children on a beach. I also think it's a health and a safety concern.
But I
I
think that
truly do.
people go there at their own risk, knowing that that's a place that we allow dogs.
Yeah,
So if kids don't like dogs, then they should go to a different beach.
whatever. No. I mean, I'm not.
I think my only thing as far as the leash law is that if somebody does report a dog off a leash or a dog harms another dog or human, I think that should be enforced. And they should get a ticket for that because I have called before and it's generally because that dog has approached us multiple times and like I will cross the street and they will still cross the street. So I guess that's my only opinion. Is that they should get a ticket if the dog approaches somebody or bites somebody.
And we can do that. The only problem that we have is we have to physically see it, or else, like, if you call it in, you have to be the complainant and ticket. So that's what we'll do. But you would have to basically be the complainant, sign a ticket, because it's a crime that we can't just correct. I mean, we have to be a witness to that crime. Or we have to have a complainant. So, but that's how we'll proceed. But I get you.
But if you do more of that, the word will get around.
I think so.
Yeah. Usually does.
In which case, we don't have to deal with that. Right,
We don't have to change that.
we don't have to change anything, we keep what is current, you just have to be a little more forceful with some stuff.
I like that.
And in this meeting alone will help. I mean, people read Harbor Light, this will be in the more light.
Education.
Yes.
So no, I guess no action on leash law.
I mean, I understand the concern, I just don't see a way to fix it.
Right. Yeah, even if they're on a leash, they still run.
Exactly,
But what's in place is there, so, yeah, leave it.
for now.
I told that, like, I wasn't necessarily a big fan of the Farm Street hours with the dog, you know, but it's worked perfect. I mean, Rachel said the same thing. It's gone very well.
Nice.
Okay.
Next.
No action.
No motion, no. Okay.
One more comment.
Fine.
Oh, maybe one more. Two things Kyle mentioned, as I translated what he said. This is not a problem for openers. Is that a fair statement? I mean, okay. And something John said, you guys are trying to micromanage good judgment. And you're not going to do it. Part of the joy of living in Harbor Springs is this is a unique community. Norman Rockwell designed it, or someone like him. And I frequently, people ask me where we live, and I say, we live in Disneyland North. This is a very unique situation. People use good judgment. We have a non-problem. You guys are trying to fix it. Come on.
Thank you. Yeah, moving on.
Okay, Eastern Boardwalk project. The Western Boardwalk is done. Discussed. Looks really good. So we had that reopening, ribbon cutting, mayor cut the ribbon. We had good, I think 50, 60 people at the boardwalk party. Yeah, it was good. So now we should start talking about the eastern half. You know, the community raised over $500,000 for the western half. And the city's probably ended up contributing about $65,000 when we had given ourselves $100,000 as how much we can take from our general fund. So I think that that's really awesome on the community's part, stepped up and made this project happen. In 2022, when we estimated the costs, based on the 2018 bids. So we made our estimates 2022 of what it would cost to do the western half based on the 2018 bid we received with 25% inflation, et cetera, we had expected the whole project, western and eastern, to cost $950,000, with the western about $600,000, eastern half at $350,000. And that was doing it all at once. But since we segmented it because it would take so long to raise that much money, we segmented the western half and the eastern half. The western half is more critical. It came out to about $350,000, but we did have a benchmark as Cups to Masonry to do just an estimate of what they think it would be to do the eastern half. And the problem with the eastern half now is because it's done separate from the western half, access and getting to the eastern half is gonna be much more difficult and different. That's gonna need to be a lot more manual labor as opposed to machine work, because you cannot take those machines down on the western half of the boardwalk to get to the eastern half. So the costs, and John maybe can speak about it a little bit later, but about $500,000 as an estimate to do the eastern half. We will have a better idea of how much the city's general fund could handle probably when we do the budget this year, about how much we could contribute from the general fund. As you know, we created a fund balance policy this year that says any surplus money is gonna, in our budget, is gonna go to this repairs and replacement fund specifically for projects like the boardwalk, parking lots, et cetera. So we can save money to fix these, fix this infrastructure or replace this infrastructure. Saying all that, I think, we have, the council has three options, three paths forward. One is to immediately start fundraising for the eastern half and then determine at budget season how much the city can pitch in toward that goal. Or wait until December to determine if the city can fund the project from general fund dollars or how much the city can contribute and then start fundraising then. Or we hold off on the eastern half for a few years or even altogether if that's council desires. I think there appears to be some momentum. I've heard from some previous donors that they would like to donate for the eastern half. So there appears to be some momentum to start funding the eastern half. I also think it would probably take at least 3-4 years to save the money. And now that's $500,000, several years to probably save up the money to do this without, you never know when unexpected expenses might come up as well. So I don't think we can do this with general fund money, at least within 3-4 years, maybe longer, if we had to fund it completely ourselves. So if that's the direction we want to do, I think we should probably start fundraising sooner. So we bid it out in 2024 and potentially get the money to do a 2025 construction project. But that is all dependent on what direction council wants to go. But I think those are the paths forward. So John, I don't know if you want to explain a little bit more about why it's a little more expensive than it would have been at once.
It's more expensive for the fact that everything is done manually. You can't get any equipment in there. Everything has to be walked in from the top of the hill. And years ago, the city gave up the right of way on Gardner Street, which means the city only has 6 feet of access. So you can't use, without a lot of detail and express written consent of the property owners. Now, at the end of Gardner Street, Demer, and I don't remember the gentleman's name next door, which all had brick pavers. You can't take a dump truck in there, can't set a dumpster in there. There's a lot more that goes into this, and when you demo it, everything comes down by hand. So you're walking everything down, walking everything back up. Then lies the fact of whether it's wood piles or concrete foundations, it won't make any difference. You still have to figure out how to get all that stuff in. Some of the other issue is on the bottom end of that end, the foundations were redone probably 20 or 30 years ago. Those foundations are still in good shape, so they can get reused. So again, even if you did have access up there, you can't get around the existing foundations. Power lines on the upper end of the bluff prohibit much crane use, if any. So it's not like you can cut the boardwalk in sections, you just lift it out. So it's a lot more intensive. My question on the whole thing is, do we really need it? Traffic, I mean, it's a nice access to down to Gardner Street, but pretty much the only thing down that way is the movie theater. And I don't know, hundreds of people are using the boardwalk now. You go down to 3rd Street and you can go either direction. You're basically in the middle of town. So to me, it's just whether it's $200,000 or $500,000, it's a huge expense. I just don't particularly see the need for on my end, but if we fundraised out kind of thing, it's one of those things. I think a lot of the existing foundations could possibly get reused with some revamp, but that's a engineering thing where Benchmark would have to look at. I don't have that PhD degree behind my name to say whether that's fruition or not, but I think there's some ways to maybe get it done, but right now, just for a budget purpose, that's pretty realistic.
Public comment on the board?
Here's my family, on Ann Street. I do agree with your comment, John. Do we really need it? There's one block difference when you come down from the existing boardwalk, which is awesome. You know, it's a great place to walk. But if we're talking one block, I guess the only reason is that when fundraising was done, everybody talked about the need for the full boardwalk. But I think only because it had always have been that same long, you know, boardwalk. But do we really need it? Seems like a lot of money that maybe could be put towards something else. I don't know if people would be disappointed, those who donated money, but their money did get used for the western part of the boardwalk. So that was complete in a really fine way. So I asked that question myself. Do we really need that? The time required to raise the money and accrue the money, and then the difficulty of the hand labor. It sounds like it would be a challenge. I'm not sure what kind of backlash there would be if it didn't happen. And I guess that would be the only question I have in my mind. You know, if there would be some kind of backlash because of that by not doing it. Thanks.
And from my limited perspective, it always seemed like the majority of people were accessing going from the bluff down on the western. And not so much the eastern stairs. So if that's, you think from history, you think that was true, that more people. When you have that, you don't know that. Like John said, I don't know. Want to spend the money when you have, but majority of people take the west stairs.
You're up there almost every morning, so.
Hundreds of hours.
Okay.
Kathy Monsell, 560 Sergeant Street. I guess my only question is, if we decide that the city decides that we don't want to do the eastern side, do we have to take down the old part? And there's got to be some cost associated with that, I assume. And I don't know, I'm just think that's something else that needs to be, you couldn't just leave it, could you?
Yes.
Okay, that's, I'll let you guys answer that, that's my.
And that brings up a good point, is that if we eventually basically abandon that, then remember, this is a highway by right easement that we have that I'm assuming Jim would eventually lose that and then we would never get it back. Or we'd have to get it back via getting easements from other property owners. So if it's something we don't do within a certain amount of time, we'll lose it for good. So that's just something to consider. If we don't maintain it.
Thank you. Bill?
Bill Mulder, West 7th Street. And I'm thinking about, we've been extraordinarily fortunate with fundraising for this project and for some others. And I know we've got the underpass for the bike trail coming up. And that's likely going to need some fundraising too. I don't know which is more important to residents. I'm kind of thinking that with the western part of the boardwalk in place, maybe residents would favor some investment in the underpass to extend the trail system. And council can decide if it makes sense to try to do fundraising for two projects at the same time, or is the boardwalk something that could wait a couple of years while we assess. And anyway, people have worked very hard to get approval from MDOT to work on the underpass, and I know people are thinking about it, looking for it. So you all can consider what the priority is.
I have a question. What if people came forward and there was enough money to pay for the whole thing from donations? And yes, maybe it is frivolous. We don't strictly need it, but maybe some people just feel so convicted about the historic value of it, or I'm not sure what all the reasons would be, but maybe if it's paid for, then
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, yeah.
Is there still talk about burying the lines that would be above that portion?
So
If you were talking,
yeah, to talk about the burial of the lines was not for that portion of,
Okay,
it's west of the high school. So part of the portion, but
Right.
most of it's west of between Spring Street and the high school. Those letters went out, but I haven't heard back from anyone, so.
It's basically about what's already done.
Yeah. Would hate to lose the momentum we have as far as fundraising.
great.
And yeah, I don't know what the emotional attachment is to the other half of the boardwalk. One person would be upset. She doesn't want to get a vote.
Well, I think, I mean, that there's a couple of different perspectives. Need, we don't have. You can get from the top to the bottom and back again. And it's a beautiful job and it'll last. But we've always heard about preservation. People that, and the fact that there are donors who are willing to step up again right after this donation to keep it going, I think is a good indicator that there's interest in finishing and preserving the impact track. That's aside from the loss of right of way that we have today. So it's really, is it enough of a preservation project and are there enough donors interested in doing it that we can pull it off?
What's the timeline on the project, Jim? Do you know?
I don't know that there's a definite timeline, but I mean, certainly if it wasn't used for 6 years, or 15 years, certainly you'd lose it.
And as long as we were pursuing fundraising and all that, you really wouldn't start a clock because our intent is to rebuild it. You'd be okay there. I think, but
If you just let it go fallow for 15 years, it would be gone.
If you set this up for a fall 24, spring 25.
There's plenty of time to raise the money.
and again, it's meant, clearly pointed out, there's momentum and you always hate to lose
Yeah,
momentum.
because I know one person wants to do a matching
There you go.
deal again. Which would be helpful.
I mean, we've been talking about this project for
10 years.
a long time and it's always been, let's preserve it, let's rebuild the whole thing. So if we did continue to fundraise, if we continued with the momentum that we had, if we go through the budget cycle, we can always get to the point where we say it's not gonna work. We don't have enough interest, the budget doesn't allow it, it's too far out, we can come back and reconsider. I think we were very clear that we were going to fundraise and build the west part of the boardwalk. We did that. It's a great job. Let's find out about the east side.
Oh, and also some of that pricing does reflect a lot of changes within the county building codes that were not in place back in 2018. So we learned.
You mean the code has changed?
Yeah.
Again, sorry.
And we learned a lot in the first phase, so.
So I guess what I'm gathering that from, I hear the majority would want to go forward with fundraising. And so the question is, you just want to dive into that now? Just start right away and then come back and see where we're at in budget in December?
When you're fundraising, the sooner you build on the momentum, the sooner you start, the longer you have. I mean, I would.
Yeah, I think it's.
No reason to stop.
Yeah, we never really stopped.
No.
It's fall 23 if we said, a fall 24.
Yeah, because it's not gonna get done this year, and next year project.
Unless somebody wanted to write a check, we started in March.
They just need to be kind of clear when we go back to the donors. We're not sure length of time, it just depends. $500,000 is to go back to the well.
Right.
2 weeks later and say, we want to do this again. I'm sure we got people that'll do it, but it might take 2 years. Or we'll get to budget season and say, okay, we have 275, 300 grand. Over the next 2 years, the city can afford to, put in a couple $100,000 to make up the difference and set a date, but we just don't want people donating money and then having it be 3 years down the line, still sitting there.
Well, like we did with the western part, we need to be clear on what we're trying to do and how we're gonna do it, keep people informed.
But if we're gonna fundraise, I do think we need to keep the timeline short because cost to get, we get 3 years later, now the cost's gone up to $650,000. So we want to be very careful that we strive for, we don't
And then-
guarantee anything, but strive for
And
a.
that number does fluctuate for like a year down the road.
Yeah.
So
It could go up or down a little bit, but it could go up higher. 3 years.
Yeah. that's a realistic number, probably would end up being less, if I had to guess.
And we start fundraising and then like in February revisit.
Yeah.
And see if we have enough to put it out to bid. Or March
And by then we've got a couple of the building details that need to be figured out.
And I think by February, we would know the budget season, what our fund balance. is.
Yeah.
We also remember we have the harbor master building. Some other things that are on the docket. As Bill said, the bike path, just a bunch of things.
Endless things. All right, well, I think.
Yeah, you have a question?
Oh, go ahead.
There's an intermediate course too, it might be some programs use the idea of just getting a pledge. So somebody doesn't have to write a check right now. So, here's our plan, here's the possible timeline. Can we put it down for $100,000, Mr. Smith? And you don't have to pay it yet. We don't even know if we can do this thing yet, but we're just taking account of what we got. So that could alleviate some concern about having you write a check for an uncertain date.
And we've accepted pledges for the boardwalk too. Yeah, so.
And that's kind of where my question is going, what happens if you raise $100,000 and that's it? Can you give it back? I don't know what the commitment is, so the idea of a pledge.
They can speak to that. We can get it back.
Yeah, we would set up an escrow account or some such vehicle and the problem that I could see with some of the larger donors. If you said, all right, here's the $200,000 or $200,000 donation. And then it falls through, they've then hence probably deducted that on their tax return, lost $12,000 worth of interest income. And then we say, here's your check back. Well, that's not great business.
But could they choose to put it to a different project? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is something we need to do details, think this through a little bit.
But if we decide to go ahead with the fundraising, we can figure out how to present that and how to go back to the donors.
I just don't want to get pushed into a corner with something like that where we have several $100,000 that people have already written off and lost interest on, and then here's.
But
never
again,
mind, we were
the
getting-
pledge route addresses that.
The pledge, yes,
It does
that's a big deal.
I think if we're going to fundraise, we should commit to.
Well, that's
commit to
it.
Doing the project.
Yes.
Because that.
To some extent anyways. I mean, I'm kind of with John to a certain extent that, do we really need it?
No,
But,
the answer to that is easy. No, we don't need it.
I grew up here on it. I don't remember ever going down that far because I didn't need to. I needed to get to Gurney's from school, so.
Well, the original boardwalk was straight down, and
Oh, and it's possible we'll get some feedback after this. So it goes to the paper one.
Oh, yes, I have no doubt of that.
No, but that's good. We'll get a better feel for where people's minds are.
I think we'll start.
fundraising. We should probably powwow with Rachel. Come up with
A way to do it.
any pledges or how we can put it together. And do it before summer's over. That's fair.
I just have a question, is it possible to go back for grant money again? And we've attempted that once, and I know other communities have gotten funding for boardwalks. I mean, it might be worth investigating once more.
It's possible, but a lot of
Might be up there.
the grants that, and I probably Rachel could correct me, but for example, they're looking at more regional uses of trails and boardwalks, and also that we failed, didn't get the grant the first time on the western half. I think it's less likely. We could always try, but I think we probably have better luck being a grant with a bike path for. So it's, we need to use our grants wisely before we, utilize a grant application for one project, but we might have a better chance of getting another project with it, so.
Especially since they're already aware of the situation at the grant, Obviously, the need comes into play when they make their decisions.
Right.
Obviously, we didn't need the 500 grand for the first one, we raised it in 3 months. That probably is not a good thing when you're trying to get money.
Right, well, we tapped everybody that we could, so there's
Right.
not more money. That would be a reason.
But I do think the regional bike path would be probably where we want to focus more of our grant money on, because that's gonna be $1 million all day long.
And it's the region, it's
And
regional.
it's regional, it connects all the way to Charlotte, so I think that we have a much better chance with that.
So we need to tie the bike path into the eastern part of the boardwalk. Okay,
Okay, next.
Okay. Zorn Park Playground donor agreement. So we received the donor agreement from the Zorn Park Advocates to install or reinstall playground equipment at City Beach. Just a reminder, we took out that equipment in 2020 due to safety concerns, intended to reinstall it. Only had enough money, under $10,000 to do it. So we were looking at the grass, but it originally was on the beach. So the advocates sent us an agreement, and I've worked back and forth with their attorney to, modify and change some of the terminology in the agreement. I brought it to council with, Jim Raymer gave it a review, staff gave it a review, with terminology that I think we did the best we could, given the time frame that we had. I was working up till Thursday morning, 11 a.m. before I sent out the council packet on this. So the agreement basically amounts to giving the city $80,000 for reinstalling the swing set on the beach, installing a new play set on the beach, and then building a retaining wall for, a small little wall for concrete wall to protect the turf, the ADA turf there. The agreement, you probably had time to see it and read through it, as I know I've talked to some of you. There's exhibits that show the location. And I think the major provisions, which are the terms and conditions, talk about the budget, how the donation is going to happen, as well as some standard language. So I think the biggest one that I've heard feedback so far is on how the donation, how the advocates will distribute the money to the city. Basically, the arrangement that was in this agreement, or that is in this agreement, is for if the city needs to make a deposit. The Zorn Park Advocates, they have a $80,000 in a bank account, and then if we need a deposit to purchase equipment, we let them know and they cut us a check, or if we do support, we give them their receipt and they cut us a check. Other ways, so they have a bank account, other ways of doing that are creating an escrow account where the city can draw money as it needs it. And we do that for example, our planning for, we changed the policy on site plans. So when we do someone needs to do a site plan or special land use review, we have them put money in an escrow account, and then as our planning consultant spends time on it, we would draw money to pay our planning consultant to do that review. And then as we do have a donation policy, and then there's guidelines to talk about different considerations council could have when they're accepting an agreement for infrastructure, and from aesthetic to safety. And so it's up to council to weigh those different guidelines. One of those guidelines is that no construction shall start or no purchase, nothing will happen until the money is received. So there's that to consider as well, but, as far as the staff perspective, this is something that, we worked out with the advocates, and August 7th was the deadline we had, so we brought it to you as is. So it's up to council now, because this project exceeds the cost that I can authorize staff to pay for, which is $10,000 is my limit. This is $80,000 for $8,000 project, even though it's donated funds, our policy is that council authorizes payment for anything of that, and also our donation agreement, our donation policy requires council to approve any contract or agreement with the donor.
Public comment?
I have a question for Tim and Victor. So they maintain control of the bank account, so we have to ask them to write a check.
The way this is written, yes.
Don't you think that's, well, I don't know, I just think that could be a little bit dangerous, like, let's say somebody on the advocates doesn't like a color we chose, and they say, well, we're not gonna pay you. I think an escrow account, if you can manage to negotiate it, it would be much safer.
Anyone else?
They mentioned that we are just so excited about this in parks. It's just gonna be really nice. It's gonna look like it's always been there, and I think it would be such a big addition for downtown. I hope it all gets worked out.
Definitely a positive for the city.
My problem was just the way that money was situated. Escrow account seems safer for the overall scheme, and just the way this is all transpired over the last year and a half. It would at least guarantee that it's there in place.
So it also complies with the policy, says that we're not gonna start a project until we have money. And it's about control. It's a city project. I think the city should have control of the funds and the project and the color decisions and the location decisions. So we're very grateful to the people that are willing to put up the donation to do it. It's a definite improvement, but the city should maintain control of the project.
Have you talked to them about an escrow account?
I did, Rachel and I did, in the first Zoom conversation we had with their attorney, and we talked about an escrow because he had asked what kind of vehicles we normally use, and I mentioned escrow. It wasn't an in-depth conversation.
So it could be something we could go back to and talk about.
There's just some sketchy wording in there. But
You could very easily do that. I think, in retrospect, this is not a really good way to do it. The money should be in the city's hands.
For our policy.
or they're donating X, and the project is gonna cost Y, and whatever the difference is, the city's covering the difference if it's over, so, I mean, their donation will cover a certain aspect of things.
The other side of that coin, I mean, if from their donors, the donor standpoint, I could say, okay, here's $80,150. And all of a sudden we spend 60, walk away with 20. I mean, to be fair to them, there will be an accounting at the end. Okay, here's all the invoices, here's everything.
Correct.
That goes through the typical audit program that we do here at the city. And here's your receipts. That's only fair to them as well.
Oh, absolutely.
So with an escrow account, if we don't need $80,000, then whatever's left over goes back to them.
Probably be stated in here somehow, some way. Anything over and above would be absorbed by the city thing, anything under would be returned to the advocates. Yeah, there's a little,
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, I think I would.
but that's just a good way of doing business.
Yeah. The way business is done, pretty much should be done.
I think that's my only, I mean, if you guys have obviously read over the wording, some of the wording was a little iffy, I think, in some aspects, but I mean, on a legal standpoint, obviously he's the man, so if you guys are comfortable with it.
So just as, it would be a signed agreement, so legally both parties are are bound to the terms and conditions. So yeah, there's the whole part where there's the whereases, and those whereases are really just declaratory intentions, but the terms and conditions and numbered items are really the ones to focus on. And those, as stated here, would be, you know, upheld through, you know, the courts, but we don't want to go to the courts and enforce any provisions. We'd rather have provisions that are clear and.
Absolutely.
and- Yeah, so.
So the only, Jim, just to clarify, the only things that would create any kind of obligation or precedent to us are the numbered items.
Well,
Any
I-
extraneous verbiage that's in the whereas.
you know, there is a somewhat unusual, I mean, this paragraph 1 is a little bit unusual to see that included, say that the recitals become a part of the agreement. And the interpretation of the agreement is to be done in light of those statements. So if there are things in the whereas clauses that you object to, let's get it out and let's deal with it.
Well, I'll share my observations as I read through the agreement, and whereas where we state that persons interested in maintaining the historical natural beauty and aesthetics of the park. That was a consideration that was discussed. It's part of the master plan. I don't think it belongs in this agreement. Our intent was to reinstall playground equipment to provide children with a safe place to play. And if the city planning commission decide that the application of the master plan has a different perspective than those of the donors, I don't think this belongs in here, and I don't want to have something that the city can then be called upon in the future, saying that per this agreement, we made a commitment to maintain a certain status in any of our parks or any of our properties. I'm uncomfortable with that. I don't know how anybody else feels. Now, again, if that's just a recital and it doesn't create anything, I think we all, any kind of obligation or future reference, but we all know that if it's in an agreement, it could be referenced in the future.
I questioned that too.
Yeah,
As did I.
When it comes to
there's no purpose for that.
Yeah, when I talked to them about that, their view was that just states what their group is, that their group is as an association of persons that's interested in that. My language there to counter that was maybe to include it in their opinion, but they didn't want that in there, so, but that's.
It's very clear that that was their perspective from day one.
Yeah.
I don't know that it belongs. And then I was also a little hesitant where and the collaboration clause says that we will implement a playground project and make a cause to be made improvements in accordance with the parties will make reasonable efforts of regular communication. We're going to be communicating at planning. We're going to be communicating at public meetings, at council. I don't think we should carve out a special channel of communications with any private group. There's plenty of ways for them to be informed, to maintain, to ask questions. Again, it's reasonable. It doesn't belong in the agreement. I know we've already talked about the donation of funds, so that one's covered. Those were my observations.
Very good.
Yeah, I agree with that. My biggest one was the funds, because it's truly not a donation if they have control of the money. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. I agree with John on some of the other wording. If this isn't a platform for them to tell us what they're about, it's an agreement between the city and the people giving the donation, and that's really all it should be. It shouldn't have all the extra wordage in it, I don't think. I guess my question would be, if we go back to them and say, you know, here's where we are, how many times are we gonna do this? You know, I think we've gone back and forth a lot with them. I think we need to put a limit on, here's what we have to have in order to accept this. It's a very generous donation for the playground. I hope we can make it work.
And we're very grateful.
And we're very, but I think we need to say, here's what we need. This is where you need to meet us on this, or we're done. Because I can foresee this going back and forth and back and forth, and we've already spent, especially Victor and Rachel, a lot of time.
I think council would need to make a motion to say that we would accept the agreement based on the modifications or stipulations, conditions here, and then
And that's,
if they don't accept it, then
then
they don't accept that agreement.
Yeah.
So
I think that would be a wise way to do it.
I
But
would-
I think those are reasonable. That's from the city standpoint.
But do we have enough information on the financing with the escrow account, how that's actually may work out? Do we have enough info to include that in a motion?
Oh, what would work out, yeah.
You know, escrow account, or who's gonna draw the funds and when, or is it just all in one lump sum?
I think it needs to be a lump sum of the donation to the city. And they spend it on the playground as the agreement that that's what the donation is for. If there's any left,
With proofs of
Sure.
expenditures at the end of the project?
yeah.
Full
and-
accounting, yeah.
yeah,
You would provide a full accounting
Yeah,
anyway,
absolutely.
Yeah, yes.
and whatever.
And if there's some left, it goes back to them, of course.
So
I
I mean,
mean,
you would create the escrow account.
Yeah, I would just set up a separate
Yeah.
escrow account in First Community. You can go in there if that's what you so choose, and then.
it's
every
very
invoice-
clean that way, then there's nothing else. I think that makes it really good.
When you get a bill, you pay it, you do your spreadsheet like you normally would.
Yeah,
And so I got the escrow account, the whereas number 6 about the group's intentions, and then 0.5 striking out that sentence on collaborate on communication. Okay. And then the only other thing I think council should decide is how long do you want to give them to respond? So next council meeting, or which is August 21st? Or
Let's put 2 weeks.
yeah, I mean, I think that's fair.
So it's
Like redoing the whole contract.
No, it
some
should
wording.
It's a yes or a no.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, if he doesn't want to.
Well, the reason I asked if there's a deadline, so that way we
No,
need
there
a
should
staff,
be.
so we know what we can do.
There definitely should be that.
Next council meeting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would so move.
And I second.
Cox,
Yes.
Nancy Melky. Or Nancy.
Yes, yes.
Thank Nancy. Jamie Melky, yes. Nancy Rendell.
Yes.
John Leo.
Yes.
Matt Rivera.
Yes.
Motion carried. Sorry about that.
All right.
Both at the same time, it's fine.
Got a little fun anyway.
Moving on to the city manager report. So I do have just a handful of updates there, so bear with me. We are selling our 2010 GMC pickup truck, has 136,000 miles, so bids are being accepted through noon this Friday, August 11th. So if anyone wants a used city truck, bid on it.
Comes with a warranty.
I'm not sure about that. If you pay extra. 2 candidates have officially filed for council seats, Michael Behrman and Kathy Macho, so that will be for the 2 open positions on November 7th. Obviously, the people can still write in, but those are the 2 that will appear on the ballot, the names. The DDA's hiring committee interviewed 3 candidates. They're gonna make a recommendation at, can I get that door? It's too loud. Thanks. They'll make a decision at their August 9th meeting, which is this Wednesday, about hiring. The DPW applied for and we have tentatively received approval for $50,000 in state and local recovery funds. They're distributed through the county. The county is making a final decision tonight on the funds. Those funds will be going towards some of our projects, which are rehabilitating city wells. It's an infrastructure grant, so those were some of the infrastructure issues that we saw was our wells are being moved, so to rehabilitate them, that $50,000 works well for that. City administration is holding our first union negotiation meetings with the DPW Electric Union on Monday, August 14th. Oh yeah, I mentioned this in May, we hired an IT company to do a security assessment. City scored an 87%, which is actually pretty good. I'm pleasantly surprised. There's still some things that we need to work out, especially on that internally, but we're gonna be working with that with our IT consultants, but I'm happy with our security. It's better than I thought it was. DPW is working on creating a pole attachment agreement and new fees for utilities that connect to the city's electric poles. So AT&T Charter, they connect to our poles and we charge them, but the fee we have is decades old. So we're relooking at actually creating agreements and new fees so we can collect more revenue, which will help actually us with the cost of maintaining our poles and et cetera. We reviewed the initial substation location survey and geotechnical investigations. GRP Engineering will come to council on the 21st with a summary and proposed path forward, timeline, costs, et cetera. We also reviewed the initial harbor master building plans with Mark Bidet from Blueberry Architects. Those are going to be presented to Harbor Commission on Wednesday, and then they'll eventually go to council for final approval and then planning commission. We haven't, well, as I said, and when I wrote this, we hadn't heard anything from the Johnson versus City Harbor Springs lawsuit, but Jim, I believe we did hear something.
Yes, there's
on
going to be,
Thursday.
there is a status conference that's going to be held on August 23rd in the circuit court, which I'll participate in. So we'll just set a timeline for resolution of the case. At this point, I will say the plaintiff is overdue on filing certain of their disclosures. So we've notified them of that and expect to have those in hand by the time of the status conference. So we'll have a better understanding of their position and how we need to defend it and overcome their arguments.
City was also named a party in the M119 condemnation claim on West Bluff property. But if you remember, that is a property that the city determined that we don't own. So we're really have no interest in the case. It's just the state listed everyone they possibly thought had any interest in that property. And Jim is working on that one. The DDA Merchants Walkway project is in the engineering phase. We have received correspondence from an attorney representing property owners there saying that the walkway is hazardous. So I had DPW, I had Jim Raymer look over it, the letter, because he received a letter from their attorney. And we added some safety measures back there, including paint, sawhorses, and signage to clearly identify that it is hazardous and people should stay away from the broken up concrete area. The city's appraisal came back for the Jervis B. Webb land. It came to $430,000. As remember, Jervis B. Webb's appraisal came back at $420,000, so not too far off. So the number we're using in our ballot question is $425,000 as the minimum bid, or minimum sale price of the property. We also have one open seat on the planning commission and a tree board. Both of those seats expired in December of 2023. So no one's applied, but we could happy to fill those in right now, or just wait till December to fill those in. But if you know anyone that's interested in either of those boards, please let them know. The Judd Hill project has been out to bid, and then finally construction of the concrete skate park will begin in late August. That'll start with that demolitions. Council will see the actual plan next council meeting. Yeah, so I know there's quite a few meeting updates there, but sorry, updates there. We have just updates on meetings. Had a couple, well, I had one MPPA meeting, a couple housing meetings. There's a Housing North Regional Partnership meeting in Traverse City, and that is the state of Michigan developed a statewide housing plan. So they're inviting all the region's stakeholders to partake in how to start, I guess, organize what parts of the plan are most important and how we're going to implement parts of the plan for our region. There was a rural leadership summit meeting in Cadillac. I attended that just to learn more about grant opportunities and situations going on, changing conditions in Michigan, in rural areas, and new laws and funding opportunities for rural Michigan. And we did meet with the county administrator and their lawyer. Jim and I met with them, and so did Nick, about the TIF capture issue, and we're having ongoing communication with them. I don't think we made any substantial progress, but we're still talking. And we'll have more updates in the future about that. Yeah. Any questions?
All right.
Yes.
Okay. Any new or old business?
I've just got one thing, kind of tag with the skate park construction. Met with Rachel up there today, because I'm gonna help out with the demo. Sorry, my voice is scratchy, but she mentioned the crew coming in is having trouble with housing and some different things. So there was talk of possibly a camper or two maybe being housed up or near the park in the baseball parking area or something like that. I think normally they need our approval for this or the other thing. I would recommend that we allow Rachel, Victor, Kyle, and Lucas, the heads of everything, to handle whatever it is this construction company may need over the next 30 days of construction to, within the best interest of everything, just give them the power to manage how they see fit.
I did receive that email last Friday, I was supposed to sit down with Lucas and then talk with Kyle and Jeff about approaching that, so. The company is doing this at cost, so that's, you know, the benefit to the city, so, you know.
We're talking about a couple of trailers next to a construction site. It's not gonna.
The biggest concern is safety, security of their equipment, materials, whatever. They're obviously from Oregon, so they don't quite know what we have going on here, but I personally don't see a problem with one or two trailers there, and then if they have a couple others, maybe they go to the state park or whatever it is they do, but I don't have a problem with what's going on.
Be involved
No, it's fine.
process. I think you guys can handle.
Do you need anything specifically from us?
I can look at the request in detail, but if the council is okay with staff dealing with, potentially doing something different than our ordinances allows, just to accommodate them because it is a city project, I can do that. But I don't know when they're coming up. I might want to bring that back to you at August 21st meeting, so I can get the okay at, because your vision of what might be allowable could be different than what we think is allowable. You get what I'm saying? So, you know, a trailer right on the road.
Right, well, I just didn't know with those guys wheeling in here in the next couple of weeks.
I think they're late August, so they are gonna want to secure a place as soon as possible, something, obviously, because they're coming here. I get that.
Like I said, you know, I don't think we need to micromanage that either, so.
No, I think, I mean, if the
Sweet.
plan comes up with something you think is extraordinary and we would want to be involved, sure. But
I would make sure you have communication with Big Bluffs once the decision's made, just so they know and feel.
Sounds like Rachel has been in touch with the
Yeah.
manager there.
Yeah, just so
Things
they're
like that,
aware
so-
of what's going on.
Because we're starting demo in
Late
a
August.
week.
Right.
No, I think right after they have a
It's being closed this weekend.
Friday or Saturday, they have some kind of function, and the following week demo starts.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sure they won't mind, as long as they just know what's happening, especially if people are living there.
but anyway, we may have, there's something special has to be done. I think you guys should have the authority to do it without
yeah, good,
us.
good call.
So that's all I got.
No further business. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you for coming.
Been yelling too much?